Hello,
Hello.
Sierra.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
That's
Glad
Dr.
this
Gar.
is working.
Yeah, everything's going smooth. Okay, one second. How are you doing?
I'm fine. It's been kind of a stressful day. I went to the dentist and had to sit in the waiting room for 40 minutes in the middle of my appointment. So that was fantastic. But other than that,
No, I
pretty
get that.
good.
It started like pouring down raining here, and it was a nice day too. I had an appointment earlier, but then it just started pouring down raining, and I got home right before it started, so I felt
Well, at
lucky,
least you got home when it was going on. I hate being stuck in the rain.
right? Okay, one second.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
For joining.
Welcome to tonight's discussion. We'll be discussing anxiety and ADHD and discussing some treatments and symptoms with Adrian here, as well as Dr. Gard, who is joining in one second. Okay, so while we wait on Dr. Gard to get here, I want to just have everyone staring. So as I just said, so tonight we will be discussing anxiety and ADHD and as it relates. And one of the main focus that we're going to talk about is how do they go together, anxiety and ADHD. And then Adrian will also be discussing another angle of it, adding on top of that members of the LGBTQ community and how much difficult that could be dealing with that. On top of a myriad of factors. And we'll be talking about how does anxiety and ADHD relate to each other as it relates to COVID when we've been in social isolation. I know me, as I struggle with anxiety heavily, it's been pretty hard. And maybe we can just start off by just sharing our personal experiences, Adrian. But for me, with anxiety, it's been a bit difficult to work through my anxious fits and not have to bounce around at school or have people to socialize with. So for me, I definitely have gotten into yoga. If you have been coming to our Therapy Thursdays, I definitely have been advocating for yoga a lot. I feel like a little yogi partially. So definitely yoga and meditation and journaling has been really helpful for me. And then Adrian can go as well, and then I'll take it to the school aspect.
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is my first time joining this. My name's Adrian. I'm usually in the chat. I am an intern with UHMP. I do video stuff. And I am a trans guy. I can't talk. And I have ADHD and I have anxiety. I've been diagnosed with both since I was about 16. I'm now 22. So my experience with those, and particularly around around COVID and social isolation, um, it's been kind of different for me, I think, than most people because my ADHD thrived in remote learning. I was able to focus a lot more easily on my assignments and my schoolwork and all that good stuff. And both my roommates also have ADHD, which is sort of uh, is very helpful because I can relate to and understand a lot of what they're going through, and they can understand a lot of what I'm going through. But ADHD there's a lot of symptoms, and it's a kind of a wide spectrum of stuff. So some of the things that I do to cope or like resolve a issue or a focus issue or whatever are very different than how my roommates did it. So it's kind of a toss up as to whether they can actually truly be able to understand exactly what my thought processes are or not. So I do have a question on behalf of, should I just go ahead and start with the questions? Oh shoot, I can't hear you now. Are you
I'm
muted?
sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, great. Yeah, but no, I was just gonna say before we dive into the questions, a bit more, maybe we could just, as you just described your experience with school. For me, remote learning, it wasn't the best. I sat and it was pretty hard for me because at first I'm kind of like a to-do list task person. So I'm like, okay, from this time I'm gonna do this, and then from 8 to 10. But then I found out that really from 8 to 8 I was just staring at a computer all day. So that worked for you, but for me I was a bit like, oh my gosh, I'm going crazy in here. But I definitely think we both found our different ways to cope with it. So Yes. Okay, we're going to wait for Dr. Guard before we start getting to the questions. 1 second. Let me try to invite her.
All right.
But I would also say that for me, as we're just talking about our experiences with dealing with our mental health, whether it be ADHD or anxiety, I think COVID, it was a blessing and a curse in a way, because I really found out I had anxiety, or at least I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I was in like a 21-year confusion. And now I look back, I'm like, wow, you're just anxious this whole time. If only you went to a therapist and you knew. It could have helped you so much.
That's so relatable. That is so relatable.
Right? And so I was
Like,
like, wow, I went to a therapist. Yeah. But
yeah, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Going through high school with undiagnosed ADHD was a trip. Because like my high school was very competitive, and there was a lot of like very high standards for academic performance. And if you didn't like get an A or like an A minus or whatever in something, it would be like you were a terrible student and you do not deserve to be at the school, whatever. And it was like both the peers and the sort of faculty that did that, which and so when I was discovering sort of like going through high school and succeeding in certain areas and failing miserably in other areas, it made me feel like I was not worthy of being there at the school, and that I would, and like it was very confusing, you know, because I was doing well in English and like music and creative things, but I could not wrap my head around things like spatial reasoning and like geometry and math and science. And so it just made me feel dumb. And like until I was like in junior year of high school, when I finally started getting therapy for my depression and anxiety, was when my sort of therapist or the psychotherapist or whatever suggested that I take the ADHD test to like see that, to like make sure that was what was going on. And once, I don't know if I'm going on too long.
No, because I have something else to say. So go ahead. You really have opened up the combo. Go ahead.
So like once I sort of got that diagnosis and had put like a name to what was going on with me, it made things a lot easier. But I really just wished that I had gotten that help sooner. And I wish that I had been able to speak out about this stuff when I was like 14 and 15, when it was really, really affecting both my mental health and like my academic performance, which in turn affected my mental health. So that's all really.
Yeah, everything you said was 100% relatable for me. As far as my high school experience, I can go on and on about that experience in high school, and me being such a creative soul, going to a very academically rigorous high school where the focus was not on art, it was not on music. That was really a backhand, and especially because we were underfunded. So there really was no focus on that. And definitely as well, my anxiety was not a focus in that school, because all they did was just push you to work, and they pushed you to overwork. And, you know, when you have, you know, mental health issues or concerns, and especially when it's undiagnosed, you don't even realize why you're not performing as everyone else. Or, you know, it's especially in my school, I remember we would walk in and they have the honor roll posted and everyone be running up to see where they fell on the honor roll. And I'd be like, okay, well, you know, I'm not too low, but I'm just going to play the back, because again, the anxiety would flare up, you know? And I definitely that when Dr. Guard comes on, because she has a lot of work in the school system, just talking about that, you know, how do schools not cater to mental health? And, you know, we say that we're for the student, but are we really? And it goes into a much deeper and larger conversation about, you know, how we're learning in general in America, and how schools are set up, and not everyone is set to learn the same way. So definitely, you know, it's like we have school psychologists and we have people who are supposed to be there for our mental health. But the major question is, are they are we really getting help? You know, is it really for the student? And that just is a much larger picture of mental health being unaddressed in America. So it's definitely a rabbit hole. It's definitely
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I remember in my high school, there was very, very little, very small. I think it was probably only one or two people really involved in not only mental health counseling and stuff, but like things for people with like learning disabilities or stuff like that. There was very, and also like it takes a lot, for some people it takes a lot of time for these mental health things to become visible or like obvious in terms of academic performance or like emotional or physical stability. And when somebody is going through something but it's not clear to like the faculty, especially since they're not trained in mental health, it leads to a lot of people's issues being overlooked and dismissed. And like there was a lot of, I think I can say this about my high school. There was a lot of people who were struggling and there was only really one or two people that were equipped to deal with that. And so that was incredibly hard. And because those two staff members worked so hard and like they had to deal with so many different people and so many different range of problems, and it's not fair to them and it's not fair to us at all.
No, you're right. And I think, one second. But no, you're definitely right. And I think the next question is, or the next thing that reminds me is outside of the school, you know, when we get home and we get around our family and, you know, where it is that support our friends. I know for me, my mother's a psychologist, so there's definitely a lot of support. I used to feel like, you know, whenever I came into her room, it was like coming into the office and she'd be like, okay, Sierra, what's going on? So I definitely was very grateful to, you know, have a mother who was there to support me. But as I went to college and I went to NYU, and that was a very isolated experience for me. My anxiety heightened, especially I was overworking myself and I found myself with friends, but I had a panic attack for the first time. And I will honestly say that, you know, when I used to think of panic attacks, I was like, oh, what is that really? Like, you're just freaking out. But no, I really thought I had to go to a hospital. And so for me, that was the first time that I took a real look. And that was right before COVID actually really started, to be honest. But that was the first time I really had to look at my mental health and my anxiety and say, how is, by me not addressing it, by me not opening up to my friends and family, how is that making it worse? So, I mean, I would love to hear your experience, you know, with your friends or your family. You know, did you get that support? So for me, I think I did get the support, but I'm a closed off person. So a major thing I think also we can say for people on here and just in general, speaking up and opening up is a really big factor.
Definitely, for sure. At my mentally lowest point in my life, I had absolutely nobody. I felt like my family was not there for me. I was very socially isolated. I just switched to my high school, and I didn't know anybody, and I was being emotionally manipulated by somebody who I thought I could trust, and my mental health was I was at rock bottom, and I did not have anybody to turn to. So that was, I think that also very much sort of contributed to it being my lowest point. Because if I had somebody to turn to, if I had felt comfortable telling my family about what was going on with me and that person, or sorry, I got a little bit distracted by the chat. If I had been able to open up at that point to a therapist or to somebody, I think things would have been a lot different. But beyond that, after that, I have had very great friends. Once I reached, like, I don't know, 15, 16, I was able to find a close group of friends that not all of them had issues with mental health. Like some of them were not able to directly understand my anxiety or whatever was going on at that moment, but were empathetic and open-minded to hearing me and listening to what I was going through and all that. So I'm so very lucky. And I think that, some of those people ended up meeting them through social media, actually. A lot of, I know that you have a very different experience with social media, Sierra, but a lot of, I've been able to connect to a lot of people online, a lot of people that could relate to me and understand me. And that the internet essentially can be a blessing or a curse in that you can find your people, but it can also but everyone else that's not your people can contribute incredibly harmfully to your mental health.
Yeah, definitely if you're doing the whole comparison game. And I think that's so many things I want to address the question of mental in the chat, which I do think you did address, but also we can go back. But also my question before we get into the social media aspect is when you were going through it alone, right? Because a lot of people are going through things alone. And, that's a major thing that I'm pushing for, more talk about that. What were some things that you did to help cope, to stay strong, to stay mentally strong? Because there are a lot of people out there, especially now, who are going through a lot alone. So what are some things you did to make sure that you still didn't slip or that you were making sure you stayed on top of your things?
When I was at my lowest point, yes, you did. Yes. I wrote music. When I was, this is an ADHD thing, actually. There are a lot of, I've noticed in my life, I go through periods of very intense love for a hobby and go at it as hard as I possibly can for as long as I have the energy for it. And when that sort of spark or energy fizzles out, I never do it again.
Why are you describing now? I have about 50 underneath my bed. I have a DJ set. Because I'm into music as well, so it helps me. I have when I thought I wanted to get into producing, but I'm like, okay, that's too hard. I have so much. Go ahead. Oh, wow.
I totally, yeah. It's a thing. I genuinely do believe it's an ADHD thing. I've looked a little bit into it. I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah. So I wrote, I didn't journal. I thought that was kind of too basic, I guess. And I really enjoyed being creative and writing stuff. So I wrote songs about all the stuff I was going through, and they ended up being incredibly angsty and incredibly personal. And so I didn't want to share them with anybody or anything like that. But that saved me. It would have been, I think without that outlet, some things would have been a lot worse for me. And I was very lucky to have discovered that, I think.
That's beautiful, because I'm the biggest advocate for art, because art can help you with so much. And especially, people who don't think that they're artists. Everyone's an artist, if you ask me. Everyone has something to express. And yeah, same. I have a lot of different things where at my lowest, when I was feeling down, I would just get into a room and I would just start creating and just start making things. And you're right, some of it is a bit personal, some of it you do share with the world. But I think that's a really great piece, because I always ask that question whenever we have therapists, what do you do, what advice, what recommendations? And you're right, you can meditate, you can journal, but art, just expressing how you feel in that moment. And who knows, if you've never picked up a pen to draw before, you might pick up and draw something, and see something and make something beautiful. And then my next question, as we get back into, I saw up in the chat, we did talk about, are there any good mental health professionals? I think we did touch on this a bit. I know for me personally, in my school, everything was very underfunded. The school psychologists, they were really great. That we had about 2 or 3 for the whole school. So much like you, it was a lot going on. So we really weren't able to get that one-on-one attention. And I think that kind of ties into the whole question, even if they are good, are they accessible? Are students able to come in at any time? So it's there is help there, but is it enough? But also, are students even accessing that? It's so deep. And I will also say that the culture of the school matters. I know my
Oh,
school,
for sure.
it wasn't a very mental health friendly culture. As I said, the whole culture, they kind of kick kids out if you weren't doing what they wanted you to do. So even if you were to go talk to one of the school therapists, it really wasn't for that. It was really more so for college. What are you doing? Grades, those type of things.
Yeah, I think our high school cultures were very similar.
Yeah. Hello, we're back.
We are back.
Okay, we're just waiting on one other person. That is Dr. Roblyn Lewter. It's there we go.
Okay,
Hello.
wonderful. Hello.
Hi,
Hi.
Dr. Roblyn.
Hello. So I've been listening in, and I think you've already had some good comments that were shared about how to deal with this. I think one of the suggestions was mindfulness, but I also want to commend you both because I'd written in the chat box that one of the important things is releasing your emotions and feelings. And actually, art is an excellent way to release those emotions and feelings. A lot of times people, part of the challenge is we keep our feelings and our emotions bottled up. And it's not always about expressing it to someone else, but it's really just about releasing those feelings, releasing those thoughts, releasing that emotion, releasing that regret. And art is an excellent way to do that, whether it is singing, writing, composing, drawing, creating in other ways, making something, but it's an excellent way to release your emotions and feelings. So kudos to both of you for finding art and finding the benefits of really finding a way to express yourself.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I think we're kind of trailing towards the end of our discussion. I know Adrian also had another question. But just to open it back up for those just joining and those not knowing, we're talking about anxiety and ADHD tonight on For Therapy Thursday. I'm Sierra Lewter. And right now we're really discussing, and Dr. Lewter, maybe you can also go on that. How do those two things relate? Why do they usually go together, ADHD and anxiety? And how has social isolation made that worse, by people sitting in their homes?
Absolutely. Well, I think, the pandemic in and of itself, it's not just about social isolation, but the pandemic in and of itself has created a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainties about people. And as you mentioned, having that isolation and not having the access to have interaction with others. There's so much therapeutic value. I think you mentioned finding your group online, and that's really good because there are definitely pros and cons to social media, but it's absolutely a vehicle if you're fortunate enough to be able to find your group, find your special group. And so our ability to interact with others, our ability to connect with others, our ability to gain validation for others is something that's very important. And so isolation during this pandemic has been extremely, extremely difficult and extremely hard. Extremely difficult and hard for many people, which can create anxiety. It can create a great amount of fear about the unknown, about uncertainties. When we look at ADHD, and I thought it was very interesting that both of you, I was listening, had some commonalities about moving from thing to thing to thing to thing. That's a lot of times it's related to our anxiety, right? Moving from, I think, Sierra, you mentioned being a DJ and then doing something else and then doing something else and doing something else. And a lot of that is very much related to your anxiety. And so I want to go back to what the last psychologist was talking about. Finding that ability to be mindful is really helpful in addressing that. Mindfulness is just being present in the moment. And it's a lot easier said than done. But with practice, it can really help you to effectively address both anxiety and also ADHD, believe it or not. Mindfulness is the art of literally right now, while we are in this meeting, not thinking about what you're doing afterwards, not thinking about who you need to call or what you're going to eat, but really just being present in the moment, in this moment. And so that's something that really can assist with that.
Yes, and that's very true. I've definitely, as you know, I've been working on mindfulness and being present, and as it relates to my anxiety, and just calming down and breathing and staying in the moment is very beneficial. I know we just had a wonderful student join us. Would you like to say a couple words, introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sade. I joined here. I'm sorry, this will go with the noise, but I joined on here from Miss Jane. I am a part of Healing Youth Alliance and Heart Smiles in Baltimore. So yeah, shout out to us. So with Healing Youth Alliance, it kind of focused more so around mental health, helping others with mental health, mainly focused around the youth. So she asked me to just get on here and chat with you guys and answer any questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Well, I think the other question that we had, Dr. Lewter, was as we talk about the school systems and as we talk about school settings, and then Adrian, I would love for you to hop into your question and talk about how do school settings, how are they not facilitating or how are they not conducive for people with mental health conditions, whether it be anxiety or ADHD? As you know, Banneker, my high school, not conducive at all because it was very academically rigorous. So yes, just touching on that, and then I know Adrian also wanted to touch on the LGBTQ aspect. If you go ahead and ask your side.
Absolutely. Well, I actually had a grant whereby I'd won a grant, and so I went around to some of the high schools and middle schools in Washington, D.C., in fact, and started working with some of the counselors to address issues related to anxiety, related to bullying, related to other mental health challenges. And I was pretty shocked to find out that many counselors were really unaware to the extent that the students in their school were actually suffering or dealing with some of these challenges. So I think the first challenge is that schools need to really be aware of them. One of the things that I heard you both mention, Adrian and Sierra, was that many schools, you know, in this competitive nature, many school counselors, their roles have drastically shifted, and they're so focused on helping students to apply for college, helping them to, you know, find out about grant opportunities and scholarship opportunities. And while that's a really important part of a school counselor, I think in many cases, school systems being overwhelmed with the competitive nature of helping students to get into college often overlook some of the challenges that happen at that critical period of high school. And especially that period when one is considering, when they're preparing for that transition from high school to college, and all of the anxiety, all of the uncertainty, moving from being a child, a teenager, to being a young adult, and the fears that are coupled with transitioning to that stage. And so I think that school counselors need to be more aware, Sierra, of these challenges, and they need to find a better balance of blending, yes, the college preparatory information and activities, but also just some of the issues of addressing mental health. I think what the statistics are showing us is that it's very prevalent, and that many young people, many high schoolers are addressing these real issues, these very real issues, and they're often being overlooked within the school system. And the harsh reality is that most students spend the vast majority of their time at school, not actually at home with their parents. So most of their time is being spent at school. And so schools are missing a really critical opportunity of really, you know, equipping students with the opportunity of starting to address these issues, to normalizing mental health, helping them to understand that, you know, it is okay, that school is a safe place, that counselors are a safe place or space where they can go and express their feelings. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the comments in the chat box is that schools have to take care of the whole student. So again, I know it's very competitive, but I think school systems are absolutely missing that opportunity.
Yes, and I think that as we get into this, and as we keep talking about how it's a much larger issue, many things are much larger issues that won't be solved by today or tomorrow. So then the onus kind of falls on the student to take that initiative. So what advice do you have for the student? And then Shadi, I'd love to your experiences being a student as well, and if you have any similarities with things that we've shared. But what advice do you have, Dr. Lewter, for the student who needs to take their own initiative, whether it be they need to stand up to their parents, their school, or both, and say, hey, this is not okay?
Well, I'm a huge advocate, and this is one of the things that I started working with students in the schools that I was working in particular. I think students need to go to their school counselors and start to demand the resources that you need. It's okay. This is what you are, a student. You know, your parents' taxpayer dollars are helping, or sometimes tuition is paying for your education. And so it's important for students to be advocates for yourself. Another thing that I've seen young people do is start support groups. You know, you will be surprised if you start that support group, how many other students will join. You know, it's interesting when in one of the schools, and this was in a school where the counselors told me that they didn't think anyone would show up. I wanted to address bullying. And this was one of the grants that I had. So I was addressing bullying. And the counselors told me, well, we're not sure. We don't think anyone will show up, but we will give you this opportunity. Well, it was standing room only. Almost every student in the school came, and every student started talking about bullying and started talking about anxiety. And the counselors were absolutely shocked and blown away. They had no idea. So I think students are in a great position to also start clubs, start groups, start support groups. You will be surprised at how many other young people are just waiting for someone else to, you know, express that, hey, I'm suffering with this, or this is something I'm dealing with, or this is something that I want to address. So I think that's really important as well.
Yep. And that's all the time, Adrian, on the Sade, I also want you to talk. But like I just said earlier, when I was going through my panic attacks, I did not tell any friend. I told my mother, I told my father, and that's it. And definitely, you know, as the student, open yourself up to your friend. And as we open up, we normalize, and everyone knows that word. But we normalize, you know, the conversations with it, and you know, then it's more freer for discussion. So definitely.
I completely agree with the normalizing. Being able to normalize communication is a big thing. I know for me, like you said, you know, you opened up with your parents. Me personally, I didn't open up with anyone. So mine was kind of like, you know what, I got it. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to figure it out. So being able to open up and communicate is a very big part, especially during the school times, because you have school, the stresses of being in school, the stresses of being at home, the stresses of everything else. So to come to school and they have to deal with this and this and this, and there was small stuff as you don't have a pencil and your teacher's making this whole big deal about it. Small stuff like that. Like, so I think it's important for the counselors to be able to break apart from just focusing on specifically school, because it goes way further than a lot of the times you'll notice that students have a very higher chance of doing everything they're supposed to do at school when they're talking about everything that they have to talk about personally, at home, in school. Like, most people love school because it takes their mind off of things. So if you're going to school and you can't take your mind off of what you're trying to take your mind off to focus, that's the problem. I saw that Miss Jane asked me, like, what are my solutions? One of my main solutions that I heard someone say earlier was seeing a therapist. That is very helpful, even if it's inside of school, even though it's outside of school. I know that there are some schools that have programs that you can join as far as therapy, someone you can talk to. And even outside of school, I think that we have to get out the, oh, we don't need to talk to anyone type of mindset. It's the change of mindset. Like, being in a mindset to where you don't need to talk to nobody, you don't need to figure anything out. That's the issue. And you notice that a lot in our African American community, where parents say, you don't need to talk to anybody. It ain't nothing. You how old? You ain't got no problems that you're really dealing with. So we need to change our mindset of thinking, and that's where the problem comes in. That's when you'll start to see a change once the mindset is starting to be changed. In my opinion, which I think that everyone on here agrees with that.
Absolutely. And I want to encourage you, just like you're using this forum right here, social media, and I think Adrian said this, can be positive. It can be powerful. And there are opportunities to create forums just like this that you have every Thursday to start to normalize that, Sade, to start to encourage young people to talk about their feelings, to share what they're going through. I think you're absolutely right. There are also a plethora of resources within the community that are absolutely free, that many times you can seek out, counseling and therapy that may be free in your community. And as mentioned, there are various apps that can help you. There are mindfulness tools that can help you. Using creativity and art can be instrumental as well. But I think it is important to normalize this conversation, to start to have this dialogue, because you are not alone. I talk to young people every day that are dealing with some of the same challenges. I was sharing with Sierra that I have a young lady that I'm working with that's in Beijing, China, and that's dealing with the same exact issues that we're talking about right now, you know, and I'm helping her work through some of those challenges. So you're absolutely not alone. And I agree with Sade that many times, especially in communities of color, there has often been this historical practice of really encouraging young people that you're tough. You just need to be resilient. There's nothing to complain about. And it's not healthy to deny your emotions. It's not healthy to deny your feelings. That's unhealthy. And that's what we have learned. And so we have to start having that conversation. So I would also encourage you to have a dialogue with your parents, to talk to your parents, or find somebody in your family that you can trust. But to find someone that you can trust, whether it's a school counselor, it could be a school teacher, it could be your parent, but definitely to not remain silent and to have the conversation.
And I think a big thing that's ringing up to here, and I'm taking it personally, is opening up. I know the other day I was going through something tough, and as soon as I started getting sad, I said, no, I'm stronger than this. It's not going to conquer. And that's not a good mentality to have. You know, it's not okay. That's not a good mentality. You know, you have to let yourself be vulnerable. You have to let yourself open up. Even down to Adrian, your experience with social media, I have a very secluded experience. That's honest. I don't reach out to communities. I don't open up. How could that experience be so much more different if I were to? And I mean, as I'm speaking, you know, to myself as well, to others, opening up, because through this conversation and just in general, there are people who want to talk. There are so many people in this world. I promise you, there are probably about 1 million who have the same problems as you. So definitely not being afraid to speak up. That's a big thing I'm getting here.
And Sierra, one thing I would add, for all of the adults that may be watching, I think it's really important that adults are honest with kids, that we're honest about our challenges, honest about our own struggles, honest about our own anxiety. I think many times adults attempt to present a picture as if they have it all together, when in fact that's not true. You know, we all have anxiety. We all have our own challenges. And so I think it's really important that adults also take the lead in having this conversation with your children, to recognize when there are issues, to recognize when there may be challenges. And again, to start to take the initiative in normalizing this, and to let them know that anxiety is a part of life. Some of that is normal. You know, having some of these challenges are normal, and that it's okay to talk about them. Mental health is real, and that it's quite okay, and that you are a safe person in a safe space for them to talk with.
I mean, to any adult listening, there's so much more power in you expressing yourself, because it's true. Oftentimes we like to think, oh, adults have it all together. But it's like, as I get older and older and I start reaching ages, I'm like, well, they don't really have it that much together. They're kind of just still trying to figure it out.
To see it, like, oh, okay. I understand what's going on.
It makes you feel, and then that way, when a younger person is going through it, in the back of my mind, because my parents are very old, and I'm like, okay, well, they went through that. They went through this. And then that way the trials and the tribulations aren't as hard. You know, we're down this stereotype of the perfect human being, perfect adult, because most of the time adults, they're really just big kids. And I think we got to keep that on. Definitely. Adrian, do you have anything that you would like to share?
About what? I'm sorry, there was kind of a lot to discuss.
If you still have that question earlier before we wrap things up, because this has been such a beautiful discussion. Thank you so much, Sade and Dr. Lewter, for joining at the last minute. You were both wonderful.
No problem, anytime.
Yeah, you guys were great. Are great. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank
Miss Jane called me. I just got off. I was like, I just got off work. I'm in the house in like 5 minutes.
Fine timing. It was wonderful. I want to thank everyone so much for joining
I'm a
tonight.
little bit laggy.
I hope.
But I do have a question from.
Go ahead.
Uh-oh. Hello?
Oh no, we can hear you.
I'm
You're
so
good.
sorry. I'm so sorry. My thing is a mess. My live is a mess. My internet's a mess. So I have a question on behalf of an LGBTQ high school student, and who has felt particularly isolated during the pandemic. because of their gender and ADHD. So I am one, and also on behalf of some other UHMP folks. Is there any advice that you personally have, Doctor, I can't talk. I'm so sorry. For
advice
those...
on how to deal with being isolated during the pandemic and dealing with your social issues and with your mental issues during the pandemic?
Well, yes, and particularly high school students involved in being LGBTQ students in high school.
I would say find your tribe. I think, Adrian, you've already said this. I think even during isolation, what the pandemic has shown us is the power of social media, the power of the internet, that we are more connected than not, that the internet and technology has really created a borderless world. And so what I would encourage young people to do is find your tribe. Even if you're in your house by yourself in West Virginia, or someplace, I think you can use social media positively to find your tribe so that you're not isolated. I promise you that you are not alone. The very same things that you're going through, there are other people that are going through the same thing. And the amazing thing about the internet and social media is that there are so many opportunities to connect with individuals who are like-minded, individuals who are struggling with the same challenges that you may have. And so I think that's something really important if you're feeling alone and isolated. I know many schools are back in operation, but not all schools are back. And so I know many people are still continuing to attend school virtually and online, and it can be challenging, again, when you're dealing with these issues and if you're by yourself and if you're isolated. So I think it's very important for you to find your tribe and to know that you're not alone. And I think that is the benefit of social media. I can't thank Adrian enough, because I think a lot of times we bash social media and it gets a bad rap, so to speak.
It has its moments.
It has its moments,
sure.
But there are also many positive aspects as well. I can say, even for myself, there are people that I have connected with via social media that I've never met in person, and yet I know they are a support system. There are people that I rely on. There are people who encourage me. There are people who are cheerleaders of mine, and who follow the things that I do and who champion my successes. And so I think it's just important about finding your own tribe. And I think that's something that you can do even in the midst of the pandemic and even in the midst of isolation.
Yes, use social media. Social media is a very big platform that can really, because you don't even have to know the person. Y'all can be in two different, as of right now, we're all in different areas. I'm in Baltimore. Everybody's in different areas, but the way that everybody can still connect. So I think that it's important to use social media. Use everything that you have around me. There are groups that's around for LGBTQ. That's around for people to come together, for people to have conversations. You just have to go out there and be able to find them. You just have to change your mindset of, oh, it's no one like me, I have to stay here. Once you change that mindset, you'll have a very, very, very better chance of being able to, and you got to be able to do it with you first mentally, because a lot of the times you can't just go out, want to be on social media, just go out and figure this, and you don't have it together mentally. So they have to put themselves in a position to where they can learn from themselves, build themselves, and then they can go ahead and start to social network, start to be around people. But you can't do that until you understand your mental health and understand how you can fix it, work on it. And people can help do that too. Being around people can help that, but you have to be able to do it with yourself first. So I think that's important for them to know.
And the final challenge, Sade,
yeah,
I think this is a really important challenge for all of you. Be a part of the solution. We do know that negative things happen on social media, and make sure that you're a part of the solution. So if you see someone doing something negative, if you see someone sharing negative messages, do not participate in that. Speak out against that. Discontinue that conversation and that dialogue. There's so much power that we have. Sometimes we don't recognize that we're silent participants. So even if you're not the person that's actually being negative or saying negative things about other people, if you're still participating in the conversation, if you're giving it attention, then you are a silent participant. So I also think the challenge for all young people is to really be a part of the solution and to make sure that you're doing your part to spread positivity on social media and to not participate in negativity.
Yeah, and I will say thank you all so much once again. And as we wrap up, I would definitely agree. Be the change that you want to see. You know, social media can definitely be your friend. Make sure you know that it's a tool in your handbox and you're not a tool in its handbox. I don't know. Just make sure that you're in control of using it. You use it on your time. You do it when you want to do it. And definitely spreading positivity. I'll say there's some girl I follow. She's a close friend of mine. And every morning I wake up, she has a positive message. And she posts like 50 different positive things on her story. And I know some people would be like, oh my gosh. But for me, it helps. And even on my worst days, you know, she'll never know that. But there were some days where I was going through a tough time and it was like her 15 different memes that were helping me get through. And she was just checking in. She says, how are you guys doing today? How are you feeling? And, you know, I also talked about this in the last Therapy Thursday, reaching out, being that light, being that positivity, being that change that you want to see, because you never know what somebody behind the screen is going on, because we all know that we've all been going through some of our darkest times where we take the most beautiful picture the next day. We're on Instagram doing the most cutest story with our friends, yet deep down inside, we're not okay. So remembering that social media is merely a mask and knowing that as you interact with it, and then that way it can definitely be a power tool for you. I want to thank everyone again so much for joining. You guys were all wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't say it enough. I'm excited to see you guys back.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah. See you guys back here for our next Therapy Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.